Flies. Hi, I'm Hobie1. This is Red Chair reading. As you can see, no red chair today. I'm on my American beach chair sitting along the American River in Ancil Hoffman Park. We are reading The Black Book of Shadows by F.E. Higgins, Chapter 3 in this video. Let's go. Chapter 3, Arrival. It was not easy to describe Joe Zabbidou accurately. His age was impossible to determine. He was neither stout nor thin, but perhaps narrow. And he was tall, which was a distinct disadvantage in Pragus Parvis. The village dated from times when people were at least 6 inches shorter, and all dwellings were built accordingly. In fact, the place had been constructed during the years of the Great Wood Shortage. The king at the time issued a decree that every effort must be made to save wood, with the result that doors and windows were made smaller and narrower than was usual, and ceilings were particularly low. The flies are after me. Joe was suitably dressed for the weather. Although unheedful of the current fashion for the high-collared coat, instead he wore a cloak of muted green, fastened with silver toggles that fell to his ankles. The cloak itself was of the finest jocastar wool. The jocastar, an animal akin to a sheep, but with longer, more delicate legs and finer features, lived high up in the mountains of the northern hemisphere. Over a year, I've never heard of a jocastar. Get out of here, fly. Once a year, September time, it molted, and not only the most agile climbers dared venture up into the thin air to collect its wool. Only the most agile climbers. The cloak was lined with the softest fur in existence, chinchilla. On his feet, Joe wore a pair of black leather boots, highly polished, upon which sat the beautifully pressed cuffs of his mauve trousers. Around his neck was wrapped a silk scarf, and a fur hat, shaped like a cooking pot, was pulled down tightly over his ears. It could not fully contain his hair, and more than a few silver strands curled out from underneath. With every step Joe took, a set of keys, hooked to his belt, jingled tunefully against his thigh. In his right hand he carried a rather battered leather satchel, straining at the seams, and in his left a damp drawstring bag from which there emanated an intermittent croaking. Quickly, silently, Joe climbed the steep high street until he reached the last building on the left. It was an empty shop. Beyond it was a walled graveyard, the village boundary, within which stood the church. Then the road stretched away into a gray nothingness. Snow had drifted into the shop doorway and gathered in the corners of the fly-blown windows. The paintwork was peeling, and an old sign in the shape of a hat creaked above the door in the biting wind. Joe took a moment to survey the street down to the bottom of the hill. It was the early hours of the morning, but yellow oil lamps and candles glowed behind many a curtain and shutter, and more than once he saw the silhouette of a person cross back and forth in front of a window. A smile broke across his face. "This is the place," he said, and let himself in. The shop itself was quite tiny. The distance between the display window and the corner was no more than 3 paces. Joe went behind the counter and opened the solid door that led to a back room. A tiny window on the far wall allowed the dusty moon glow to lighten the gloom. The furniture was sparse and worn. 2 ladder-backed chairs and a table, a small stove, a narrow bed pushed up against the wall. In contrast, the fireplace was huge, at least 6 feet across and nearly 3 deep, like the fireplace in Xanadu. It took up almost the whole of one wall. On either side of the hearth sat a faded, upholstered armchair. It was not much, but it would do. In the depths of the night, Joe busied himself settling in. He turned up the wick and lit the lamp on the table. He unwound his scarf, took off his hat, and unfastened his cloak, and put them on the bed. Then he opened his satchel, and as a silent observer peered through the window, Joe emptied it out onto the table. The onlooker never moved. I'll have to think twice before I sit by a river and read again. The onlooker never moved, though his already huge dark eyes widened impossibly as Joe pulled out clothes. Shoes, a collection of trinkets and baubles, some rather fine jewelry, 2 loaves, a bottle of stout. Excellent. Another bottle, dark glassed and unlabeled, 4 timepieces with gold chains, a brass hurricane lamp, a rectangular glass tank, and with a vented lid, a large black book, a quill and a bottle of ink, and a polished mahogany wooden leg. The satchel was deceptively spacious. Deftly, Joe fixed the tank together, then took his drawstring bag and loosened the tie. He set it down gently on the table, and a second later a frog, a rather spectacular specimen of mixed hue and intelligent expression, emerged daintily from its folds. Very carefully, Joe picked it up and placed it inside the tank, whereupon the creature blinked lazily and munched thoughtfully on some dried insects. As Joe dropped another bag into the tank, he stiffened almost imperceptibly. Without a backward glance, he left the room, the eyes at the window still following him curiously, but they didn't seem to slip out into the street. No human ear heard him tiptoe around the back of the shop, where he pounced upon the figure at the window and held him up to the light by the scruff of his scrawny neck. "Why are you spying on me?" asked Joe in the sort of voice that demanded an answer without delay. Oh, if this is interesting to you, please hit the like button. It will help the video spread to other people. And thank you very much. Joe had the boy in such a grip that he was half choking on his collar, and his feet were barely touching the ground. He tried to speak, but fear and shock had rendered him unable. He could only open and close his mouth like a fish out of water. Joe gave him a shake and repeated the question, though less harshly this time. When he still received no answer, he let the young lad fall to the snow in a crumpled, pathetic heap. Joe took a long, hard look at the boy. He truly was pale and a sorry figure, undersized, undernourished, and shivering so hard you could almost hear his bones rattle. His eyes were striking, though, dark green with flecks of yellow, and in a ring of shadow. His skin matched the snow in tone and temperature. Joe sighed and pulled him to his feet. "And you are?" "Fitch," said the boy. "Ludlow Fitch." That is the end of Chapter 3. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in Chapter 4.